In the modern world, cold is an inconvenience. A thermostat click, an extra blanket, a steaming cup of coffee, and comfort returns in seconds. But centuries ago, across the vast open plains of North America, winter was not a season. It was an adversary, long, merciless, and absolute. And yet the indigenous peoples who lived through these frozen months did not merely endure them, they mastered them. Their shelters, clothing, and survival techniques were the result of generations of observation, adaptation, and ingenuity. They faced sub-zero temperatures, relentless winds, and heavy snow, with no metal stoves, no glass windows, and no insulated walls. Still, families slept soundly, fires burned safely inside hide shelters, and life went on, year after year. This is how Native Americans survived the deadliest winters in history. The first step, choosing where to survive survival, began with geography. Every winter, shelter was chosen with precision, guided by knowledge of wind, terrain, and sunlight. A teepee, lodge, or earth-covered dwelling could mean life or death, but only if built in the right place. Open plains were avoided. The wind there could slice through hides and extinguish fires. Instead, families positioned their shelters behind tree lines or natural ridges, using forests and hills as living windbreaks. Rock faces and cliffs served another purpose. During the day, they absorbed sunlight. At night, they released stored warmth, raising nearby temperatures by several degrees, enough to turn an unbearable night into one of relative comfort. Some valleys were used as temporary camps, but only the experienced chose them. Cold air sinks and gathers at low points. A misjudged location could trap freezing air and suffocate the shelter in cold. Firewood was another critical factor. No family settled where wood was scarce. Deadfall and dry timber were not luxuries, they were survival currency. Without fuel, a shelter was nothing more than a coffin of hides. The process was systematic. Centuries of environmental reading passed through memory, not maps. This was survival architecture in its purest form, precise, functional, and born from necessity. Shelter engineering, the teepee as a machine of warmth. To the modern eye, a teepee seems fragile, a cone of poles and animal hides against a landscape of snow and wind. Yet, its design remains one of the most efficient portable shelters ever constructed. The teepee's shape was not aesthetic, it was aerodynamic. Its conical frame deflected wind rather than resisting it, allowing storms to glide past instead of tearing through. At the center lay a small fire pit, never large, never uncontrolled. The pit was often dug a few inches into the ground to focus heat and stabilize airflow. Above it, two smoke flaps at the apex of the teepee functioned like adjustable chimneys. Depending on the wind's direction, they were tilted open or closed, guiding smoke upward while maintaining internal warmth. Small openings near the ground drew in oxygen, creating a constant circulation system, a primitive yet effective form of ventilation. This balance allowed the fire to burn all night without suffocating the inhabitants. Every adult knew how to read the fire's behavior, when to add fuel, when to let embers rest. The warmth was not constant, but managed, sustained with precision. In essence, the teepee operated like a living organism, breathing, warming, adapting. It was engineering born from centuries of trial and observation, not invention. Insulation from the earth, the hidden floor system. The cold of winter does not only fall from above, it rises from below. Frozen ground drains heat faster than air, and sleeping directly upon it can kill faster than hunger. To counter this, native families designed layered floors with remarkable efficiency. The first layer consisted of woven mats made from willow or reeds, thick, flexible, and filled with air pockets that trapped warmth. Above that came layers of dry grass, acting as insulation and cushioning. Finally, animal hides were laid fur side up, leather side down, locking in the family's body heat while blocking drafts from beneath. This was a complex insulation system, natural, renewable, and remarkably effective. It could keep the floor temperature several degrees warmer than the air outside. In the coldest periods, heated river stones were added beneath the hides. These stones, wrapped in cloth or fur, radiated slow, consistent heat through the night. What seems like instinct was in fact engineering, a form of thermodynamics practiced by people who had no formal science, only generations of experience and memory. Body heat and the geometry of survival. Even the best shelter and fire were not enough. The most powerful heat source in the teepee was the human body itself. Families slept close, often in circular formations around the central fire pit. Children and elders, the most vulnerable, occupied the center, while healthy adults formed protective rings around them. The arrangement followed a practical principle: retain heat where it was most needed. It was not random affection, it was survival geometry. Body heat was preserved through layers, multiple hides, grass insulation, and careful wrapping. Hands and feet were particularly guarded. Grass or fur was stuffed inside moccasins, and hides were bound tightly around limbs to prevent heat loss. The rule was simple: stay warm, but never sweat. Moisture was the enemy. A single layer of damp clothing could freeze solid in minutes, so families managed their movement carefully, warming themselves before rest but avoiding exhaustion. They understood, long before the term existed, that survival depended on regulating internal heat, not just creating it. The natural armor, fat and ash. When temperatures fell beyond what hides could withstand, the final defense was the skin itself. Generations discovered that animal fat, when applied to the body, acted as a natural insulator. Buffalo tallow was the most common, thick and slow to harden, forming a barrier against wind and cold. Bear fat was used during long hunts or severe cold, while deer fat, lighter and gentler, protected children. Mixed with wood ash, the result was a dark, paste-like coating that retained warmth and protected the skin from frostbite. The ash particles absorbed and stored radiant heat from firelight, while the fat sealed it in. This was more than primitive skincare. It was functional survival chemistry. The layer of fat and ash created a microclimate across the skin, maintaining a narrow band of warmth even when the outside temperature dropped far below freezing. For the people of the plains, this method could mean the difference between life and death, a natural, effective armor against the cold. Defending against the living cold, winter's dangers extended beyond temperature. When food grew scarce, predators prowled closer: wolves, mountain lions, even starving bears. Native camps were designed not only for warmth, but for defense. Dogs, bred for endurance and loyalty, served as early warning systems. Their behavior could distinguish between wind, prey, and predator, a bark for danger, a growl for intrusion. Weapons were kept within reach, never stacked away. Spears, bows, and knives had designated places, easily grasped in darkness. Even the snow itself became a tool, piled around the teepee to block drafts and channel approaching animals into predictable paths. This was not chaos, it was strategy. In a world where nature had teeth, vigilance was warmth's final companion. The philosophy of adaptation. Perhaps the most remarkable survival skill was not physical at all. It was philosophical. Winter was not viewed as an enemy to defeat, but a force to understand. Each tribe treated the season as part of life's rhythm, not an interruption of it. When storms came, shelters were tightened, not abandoned. When winds changed, camps were relocated with precision. Knowledge of weather patterns, animal migrations, and seasonal cycles replaced the need for forecasts or rescue. This relationship with nature was not based on domination, it was partnership. The land was both teacher and adversary, and through respect came survival. That perspective shaped generations. Children were taught not just how to build fires or gather fuel, but how to observe, how to feel shifts in temperature, smell snow on the air, and read the subtle movements of clouds. Knowledge was their true inheritance, and it weighed nothing. Morning after the storm, the night is long. Snow drifts against the teepee walls, the wind groans through the poles. Inside, the fire glows low, the air warm but heavy with smoke. By dawn, the storm passes. The family stirs, alive, safe, and dry. The system has worked once again. No electricity, no technology, no external aid. Only experience, generations deep, passed from elder to child, word to memory. Every winter repeated the same ritual of endurance and intelligence. They did not simply survive the cold, they turned it into a teacher. Legacy of the frozen plains. Centuries later, modern science continues to validate these traditional methods. Insulation layering, airflow systems, and radiant heating all mirror the same principles once practiced in the simplest shelters. These were not primitive techniques. They were early forms of environmental engineering, perfectly tuned to balance heat, oxygen, and sustainability. And while the tools have changed, the wisdom remains universal. Survival depends not on abundance, but on understanding. Knowledge of nature, of wind, earth, and fire once meant the difference between life and death. Today, it stands as a reminder of human resilience and the brilliance of those who learn to live in harmony with the harshest of elements. In a world that measures comfort by degrees, it's worth remembering that once, survival itself was an art. And for the native peoples of North America, winter was not a curse to be endured, it was a challenge to be met, with intelligence, respect, and unbreakable unity. This has been Medieval Uncovered, exploring the past not as myth, but as memory, a world built on courage, wisdom, and survival.